everybody, and welcome to part 2 of Light and Shadow. This is the second part of our 6-part series this year where we are exploring your light and your shadow, all of the easy to love parts of yourself, right? The fun, light parts of yourself, and then the trickier parts of yourself to love. Tonight we are, I hope you're excited, we are deconstructing this. This is the class I think you've been waiting for, where I am walking you through quadrant by quadrant everything that is on this particular grid. If you didn't get it, you may consider getting it. It is kind of, I would consider this the centerpiece of our work together this year. This is the big intellectual work, the heavy lifting that I went through to try and make sense of some different modalities, right? So tonight we're talking about astrology. Tonight we're talking about the medicine wheel, right? Tonight we're talking about Myers-Briggs type inventory, which actually was created by Carl Jung, who's one of the most, famous psychoanalysts in history. It was brought to us, not by him, but by Myers-Briggs, who wanted to make Carl Jung's inventory more accessible to people, more digestible. And so that's what the Myers-Briggs type inventory, personality type inventory, I'm an INFJ, whatever your 4-letter type is, that's what that is. And so the only prerequisite for tonight, honestly, in order for tonight to make sense, and I think probably 100% of you have already met your prerequisite, is you do need to know what your MBTI or your Myers-Briggs type inventory is. And so I mentioned that I am an INFJ. Each one of the types is plotted onto my grid. And here's, so just a couple of things that you need to know. The first thing is, I would tell you, you might want to have a notebook for tonight. We're going to do a couple of short guided meditations. And so if you feel called to a particular crystal, you could use the stones, obviously, that came with the kit, if you got it, for your quadrant. And your mist, right, whatever quadrant you're in. So if you want to work with your mist tonight, I'm West by the MBTI, right? I'm INFJ. So I'm in the Western quadrant, which actually makes a lot of sense to me. I think by the time, if you have questions about why am I in this quadrant, and my of light and shadow quadrant is different than my astrological profile, right? Like I'm a fire sign. So by Western astrology, you would place me in the southern quadrant, but then my MBTI is in the Western quadrant. It actually makes perfect sense. And so I think after tonight, you'll understand why it is that your natal astrological profile could put you in one quadrant, but your MBTI type could put you in a different one. And the reality is this, and keep this in mind as we go through tonight. I actually, maybe you know a lot of people who do what I'm about to say. I don't. Most people I know are between quadrants in a hemisphere. Okay, so if you take your chart like this, you can actually divide this work into northern and southern hemispheres. Okay, and so I am between south and west. So I am this entire quadrant right here. I am feeling and intuiting. That's how I move in the world. My natal astrological chart puts me here, and my Sage Goddess of Light and Shadow work puts me here. But I'm still all here. Nothing in the north and nothing in the east resonates with me at all, okay? And so that's still helpful information. I still don't have any activity either natally in my astrological chart or in terms of light and shadow that is in the other hemisphere. So we're going to talk about hemispheres tonight too. We're going to talk about Pluto and your moon sign a little bit tonight, and what else? North and South node. And I'll tell you something. I'm going to get as far as I can get. 90 minutes may sound like a lot of time. I used to, when I was a university professor, I taught 3-hour classes twice a week. And so I had 3 hours with my students, and you can unearth and excavate a lot more terrain when you have 3 hours than you can in 90 minutes. So what I would say is it's going to be a consistent flow of information. And I would recommend that you jot down notes, not just on what I say that's relevant to you, but because I'm kind of hoping that you'll go back in your life and apply this framework to other people, right? Maybe you're going to apply it to your children or your partner or your best friend or your mom and dad. I would actually write down all of the information tonight, because You're going to take this class once, and it might be that a year from now you have a new partner. I'm just saying. Or like a new baby is born, or your sister starts dating somebody and says, gosh, remember that light and shadow class you took? I would really love to know. He did his MBTI and here's his astrological profile, and then all of a sudden you want to look it up and you didn't take notes. So it's perfectly fine, and I want you to enjoy having more of a self-based experience in this class, meaning really focusing on your profile, you know what I mean, your stones, your oils, your MBTI, your sun sign, your moon sign, your placement of Pluto in your natal chart. But I'm just saying you might want to, I'm saying this at the beginning, so if you want to go get a notebook and really pay attention to the others, you can. And just remember that this is recorded too. You'll have this class forever. So maybe you're sitting here going, you know what, Athena? I'm not in the mood to take notes right now. I love you. And I'm not going to do that right now. Then what I would say is great. It'll be recorded. You can come back. If circumstances change, you can always go back and watch later what I said about the other signs. So just a heads up. If you do want to have some stones, or if you're feeling called to some tools, you should have your candles, your light and shadow candles, which I'm going to light at different points in our work together today. That's the light candle. And then this is your shadow candle. Because we're working with very different energy streams, right? When we're working with light, we're working with an easy and easily accessible energy stream. It doesn't take any work to get there, right? Because your light is your light. Your light is always available to you. It seeks your attention. So your light is always kind of right there, right? It's your constant companion. It's the shadow that hides from you. But think about it this way, right? When your kids are on their best behavior, are they hiding from you? No. It's when they have painted your brand new wallpaper. Or that was me when I was a little girl. My mom had just put this wallpaper in, and I was a little naughty. And I just thought it would be really neat to see what it would look like if I painted it. I could make it even prettier than it was, and so I did that. The best example of that, of kids hiding when they know they've done something wrong, is Zoe Rose, my daughter, who I had just gotten. It wasn't anything fancy, but I had set up an office for myself when we were in San Francisco, and we had gone to IKEA, and whatever, it was like a big splurge that I got a white faux leather chair, office chair. I thought it was beautiful. I had never had anything kind of nice like that before for my office, and so I was super excited about it. So I came home, and it looked so pretty, and you can see where this is going, how Zoe really wanted to decorate it for me, and so she got a beautiful pink Sharpie and proceeded to write her name and also draw some flowers on my These moments test you, because and this is so relevant to shadow work. How many times, you guys, like in all flippin' seriousness, okay, something happens. Here's what happens to me. Something happens that really flippin' pisses me off, okay? I mean, like, trigger button, all buttons being pushed, all triggers being activated. And every time it happens, and maybe it's because of the path that I'm on, but every time it happens, before I react, Spirit helps me breathe, and then reminds me that I am a very powerful being, and so are you, which means that our reactions to events in our lives can have powerful consequences. Not everyone has powerful reactions, and not everybody's reactions have consequences of significance, but mine do. I can sort of like shake the ground underneath me with my energy, right? When I'm really upset. So it's an invitation. It has been an invitation to me in my life to practice mindfulness, because in that moment I was like, you know what? If I get angry with her, if I express my shadow, right? Because we've talked about this already. One of my shadow things is I don't like when things aren't right. I'm kind of a perfectionist. Like, I just adjusted my top because it was driving me nuts. Okay, I don't like it when things aren't right, according to me. Okay, and I'm trying to get over it, but I'm 45, and like, shit, some things are probably just going to stay the way they are, the way they are. Okay, and it's helped me. Every dysfunction you have that has helped you is one that you're kind of hesitant to give up. Like, my perfectionistic tendencies make me crazy, and they make everybody around me crazy sometimes, but they also mean that things in my life tend to be pretty good, tend to look pretty good, tend to feel pretty good, tend to be pretty accurate, because I'm relentless, right? Like, I won't stop until things are kind of where they need to be. If I had turned around to her in that moment, and I'm going to share with you where her moon placement is, for example. I know of my daughter where her moon placement is in her natal chart, and her moon placement is in the position of nurturing. Okay, my son's moon placement is in the same moon placement as mine, and it's in the placement of intellectual activity and the desire to communicate. But hers is in the placement of nurturing. If I were to, as her mother, if I were to get really angry about that and lash out and say, how could you do that? And you ruined that. And that was my chair. And especially if because she was under 5 at the time, I could have disrupted her sense of safety and stability by not controlling my own emotions. Okay. Now, I'm not saying right, wrong. Some parents are going to get pissed off and their kids are 3 years old and they're not going to sit there and think, wow, my kids are still developing emotionally. My daughter's moon, is in her, I believe it's her 3rd house. Fuck, I can tell you the wrong thing. Her moon is in the 4th house. Mine is in the 3rd house. And so that means, she's in this place of nurturing. And so if I come at her and I just act angry about this chair, who cares about the chair? But 20 years from now, she's going to remember that. Versus really sitting with myself and saying, who cares about the chair? Let me care more about not projecting my shadow. And so in that moment, I remember that moment, and I remember breathing is a really good way. Okay, so when your shadow is all sorts of activated, right? Like, some shit's just happened and you're like, that's your shadow jam, and you know it. You know that if you just let it go, that lid can just fly off that box, and you can get all sorts of angry, or whatever your shadow emotion is. You can get resentful, you can get frustrated, you can get angry, you can get sad, right? I might have started screaming and crying, I might have started screaming and yelling. It just depends on what my shadow is, right? And I'm not saying I always do things right, because I make all sorts of mistakes, and I always own them too. So it's like, I'm not going to tell you I'm perfect. I'm working on this just like you are. I'm a few years ahead of you in some cases, but in some cases I'm not. Some of you have been doing this work for 20, 30 years too. I stopped in that moment. I collected myself. I looked at her and I said, that is really beautiful. It's really beautiful. Because it was. If I took it out of the immediacy of the context, the little picture that she drew was really sweet. And I said, I do need you to think about where you are drawing, because that's my chair. It's one of my personal possessions, and it's not something typically that we draw on. We don't draw on furniture or on walls or on each other, right? We draw on paper and in our coloring books. And so I love that picture. And next time I wish he would do it for me on paper, and then I could frame it and hang it, and I would have it forever. And of course, my daughter, who was very young but is also very, very smart, looked at me and said, but if I put it on your chair, you'll also have it forever. You know what I stopped and thought about in that moment? She's right. She's right. And I need to teach her to be respectful of other people's property and to not just go around drawing on shit, but she's right. And so what do you do in that moment? And so that's just one isolated example. I think we have probably 5 to 10 opportunities a day to dance with our shadow, to stop and say, I can completely lose my shit right now, right? I can completely project my shadow on this random person that I don't know, or on my brother or sister, or on my friend, or on my partner. I can completely do that right now. Why? Why would I do that, and what would be the outcome? And again, all of these questions ask you to stop in the moment and not just react. Shadow's only dangerous when it doesn't have a checkpoint. Shadow's only dangerous when it doesn't have a checkpoint. You have to be a checkpoint for your own shadow. You have to. Who else is going to do it? Who else is going to do it for you? Okay, so we are going to start There are a couple things I wanted to talk to you about. So let me go back to my original notes for session 2 planning, just because I want to make sure that all the kind of loose end topics that you had asked me about, I wanted to make sure that they're going to come up today. One thing I will tell you is going to be in today are the gifts of all of the light and shadow archetypes. That was something that you specifically asked me to include. And so I want to make sure to tell you that that's part of the planning for today. So we'll see how long today's session goes. Like I said, I'm about 15 minutes into 90 minutes, and I'm not necessarily staying too close to the clock. So I would say just leave space and we'll get to everything today. Okay, so we'll talk about the gifts of the archetypes today. We're going to talk about quantum processing a little bit. I did want to, I talked with one of you after session 1 and the debrief, and something came up, and so I wanted to kind of mention it to you today because it's part of my own process in doing this work, is acknowledging that sometimes I reflect on things that I say or teach later and want to just kind of come back and really double click on a point and make sure I communicate the fullness of the expression of what I believe or think about a certain point. And so I've mentioned before that I think parenting, when it comes to shadow work and when it comes to souls and soul contracts in particular, is really challenging. And I had said in the last, I think it was either session 1 or the debrief, I had said that adoptive parents are particularly unique and special because they come through and they don't necessarily have a specific soul contract with their children, not as birth parents, right? And so what I want to add is they do have a contract. It's just not a birthing contract. And so some soul contracts, some parenting contracts are from conception through. Some are not, because the conception work happens with a different contract, and then the adoptive parent comes through, and they're the ones that are actually going to raise this child from the moment of birth or whatever point they make that first connection in their relationship forward. And so I do want to say, as sort of coming back and double clicking on a point and making sure that I communicate the fullness of my thought, I do think adoptive parents have contracts, and I will tell you my spirit guides have affirmed that. Adoptive parents have contracts, but their contracts are not birth contracts. For whatever reason, and again, I don't have all the answers, but I have a lot of really good questions. But for whatever reason, what I have noticed is birth children who are adopted have 2 contracts. One is with the parent who will birth them, and the other is with the parent who will raise them. And those contracts are equally significant. So my main point to you is, coming back and circling back, is I don't think that birth contracts are more important than adoption contracts. And I also don't think that it's any more or less important to birth a child as it is to raise that child. And I do think sometimes, here's where I don't know. Here's what I'm curious about. So I'll leave you with this. I'm curious about this, but I don't have an answer to it. I actually think it's possible that the birth contract is related to the adoption contract, but not in a linear way. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a soul connection between birth and adoptive parents that even they aren't consciously aware of, but exists nonetheless. And so I, in my own life, I hold space for that. I haven't had a lot of experience in my own nuclear family with adoption, but so many friends. I have friends who are going through adoption, right now. And so it's a really incredible process, because the one thing I do know for sure from having so many clients who've adopted is there's this consistent heartbeat, this consistent story about knowing their adopted child before the child is adopted. And so that to me is the basis for believing there's a contract, because how do you know someone unless you are contractually connected to them, right? And wouldn't that be something that would be intentional? Isn't our Creator magnificent enough to set up contracts, not just for the birth and the arrival of the soul on this planet, but also for those who will then caretake the soul and move them forward on their path. So anyway, thank you for that. Okay, so a couple things I want to share with you. Old energies are coming up for you right now to be rewritten and to be healed. And I really want to make sure you're recognizing that. When stuff is coming up, it's coming up to be healed. I want that to become a mantra in the group, where if somebody mentions something and they say, well, I'm really struggling with this, or this is overwhelming to me, I want the immediate response from all of us, not just me, but you too, to be, wow, that's coming up to be healed. What's coming up to be healed? Why is that coming up to be healed? How are you being called to heal that, right? So it's like acknowledging that whatever themes and ideas are coming up right now. A lot of you, I believe, are also being asked to release old karma. And so I want to take a moment right now. We just smudged. Let me open a container for us to do this, because I was really feeling called in meditation this week ahead of today's session to invite you to release some old karma that's ready to go. So and when you do this, you are reworking and rewriting your own body's programs on a cellular level. Okay, so if you're really ready to recode and to surrender and to let go of some of that old karma, I want you to take a deep breath, roll your shoulders back, call your energy into present time. And spirit guides of the shadow realms, we invite you closer anyway today as we're stepping into a learning space and a healing space around old karma, old patterns, old beliefs, old ways of seeing the world. And so today we're ready to be recoded. We're ready to release old karma, old patterns that aren't serving us, surrender them back to the matrix where they can be transformed and transmuted into usable white light. And in their place, we're asking for new codes to emerge, new pathways, new neural pathways, new ways for us to think about our healing, new ways for us to integrate the wisdom around us. My hands are getting very, very warm, so you may just want to kind of put your hands up to receive as I'm talking to you right now. We're surrendering, we're releasing. As we step into this new paradigm of deeper wisdom about ourselves and the people around us, we recognize ourselves as wayfinders, as those who recognize the patterns of creation. And while we understand that these are amorphous and changing all the time, constantly shifting, we also appreciate that they teach us how to interact with each other in a more productive way. And so we give thanks as we release and receive and download and channel this wisdom today. Spirit guides of the shadow realm, we invite you to be in service to us. We ask that we find a way to be in service to you as well. Amen, aho, and so it is. Rewiring on the cellular level to receive quantum healing. And then the other thing that you can do while you're in this space of releasing and recoding is you can actually ask to open the Akashic record and to clear from your consciousness any karma that is ready to be released. Not from the record. We're not clearing from the Akash. You don't clear from the Akash. But we can void from our own personal record or clear from our own personal record any trauma that needs to be released from our physical body, our auric body, our energy field. And so accessing the Akash, asking that any wisdom that needs to be integrated spontaneously, instantaneously. Asking also, as we enter the quantum field, you have to recognize when a lot of metaphysical people hear quantum, it's like a switch shuts off and they stop listening. It's almost like they think it's too complicated or it's too esoteric. When you think quantum, just think other dimension, higher dimension, okay? Quantum means you can reach out and grab it now. So I don't want you to get scared when you hear quantum healing or quantum manifestation and you go, wow, it must be really complicated, because we hear certain words and because they're so loaded and they come from other fields, and they have a rich scientific basis, like all of a sudden we tune out. We can't do that. Quantum just literally means that it is accessible to you in this moment, and it's healing and information from another dimension. You don't have to know how it reaches you, and you don't have to know how to integrate it. That's the other piece of quantum processing. It's instantaneous and it happens without your permission. That's why it rocks humans' psyches, because we're so used to, okay, I'm getting information, let me take notes, let me write this down, let me go home and memorize my notes, let me take a test and spit it back to you to make sure I memorized it correctly. Did I give you the right answer? Like, that's the Western way of learning, which is so not multidimensional, right? Doesn't recognize that learning is spontaneous, and that by the time you even asked, did I get it right? You either did or you didn't. And if you didn't get it right, it's just because you weren't meant to have that information at your disposal right now. When you see learning as a third dimensional activity, it has to be mediated by a teacher. I'm sitting here with you right now because in a certain way, you believe that you need me. The reality is you don't. It's kind of a crazy thing, isn't it? I'm just sharing that with you because sometimes people are like, oh, quantum, and then they resist and they back off and they don't realize that there is this really powerful set of higher dimensions where we are our own teachers, where learning is spontaneous, where manifestation is spontaneous, where healing is spontaneous. And I've been teaching you about codes now for a year. I want you to see how it all works together. We're working with code right now. We're integrating shadow code right now, which means there's nothing wrong with you. All the things you thought were naughty or bad, they're really not. All the things that you thought were so like lighthearted and fun and easy about you, they have a shadow component too. It's not black and white. It's not, this is my naughty side, this is my good side. They have to stay apart. It's, this is me. And sometimes I'm pissed, and sometimes I'm happy, and sometimes I'm jealous, and sometimes I'm compassionate beyond description, and sometimes I'm so overwhelmed with my faith in God that I find it hard to operate as a human being. And sometimes I'm so grounded as a human being in my day-to-day bullshit that I find it hard to hear the voice of God. I'm saying all this to you because I have to make it this complicated before I can make it any simpler. But some of you guys are still in this binary model where it's like, oh, I'm in shadow right now. Oh, I'm not, right? As if those aren't both you. In every moment. They're both you in every moment. You're not going to heal until you acknowledge that. That's a final frontier for you. And you're honestly, you're not going to heal until you acknowledge that your healing is right here. And you just have to bring it in. Your healing is right here. And you just have to bring it in. And it sounds crazy when you hear people saying like, oh, you know, how did you work with your pain? Well, I decided one day that my pain wasn't painful. I decided one day that my pain didn't exist. I decided one day that my vision was perfect. I decided one day that my metabolism was higher. And that sounds so crazy, and yet it's quantum. The next thing I want to tell you as we prepare for tonight's work, because this is all going to make you a little more receptive, okay? Next thing I want to tell you is you are not separate from anything. If you are struggling with shadow right now, it's because you're creating a hiding place for your shadow. And your shadow can only have a hiding place. This is like big news for everybody. Your shadow can only have a hiding place if you believe that you are separate from me. And if you believe that you are separate from everyone else on this planet. And if you believe that you're separate from God. That allows you to create a hiding place for your shadow where you can go and skulk off and do things and did they see and would they know, and that comes from the idea that we are separate. If you believe the truth that we are all interconnected and we are one, then there's no need for you to hide. Right? And again, we think about this sometimes, like we think about an all-seeing God, right? And we're afraid, like, ooh, what if God could see everything? God can see everything. Okay? I mean, you are living in a quantum field where nothing is hidden. It's not so much that God needs to stop seeing you doing bad things as it is that you need to stop judging what you do as good or bad. So crazy shit, isn't it? What would they do if they knew, right? Everybody has a shadow. And so it goes back to that basic tenet. You just can't harm people. You know, you need to live your life. You need to acknowledge that you are a balanced blessing of light and shadow. And the only thing you don't have a right to do in this life is hurt anyone else. Okay. When you stop believing that you're separate from the world, from humanity, from source, from God, from me, from yourself, when you stop believing that there's some part of you that's like off limits or separate, you're not going to hide anymore, and you're not going to create a hiding place for your shadow anymore. Once there's no place for your shadow to hide, you will experience total peace. You will experience the peace that God talks about as the peace that You know, in the Bible, God talks about a peace that he can give that surpasses the peace of the world. That peace, that quantum peace, that spirit of the Holy Spirit, however you think about that peace that transcends language, that peace that is just a deep inner stillness within you that can't be rocked by any person or circumstance, that only comes when there's nowhere left to hide. As long as you have made a hiding place in yourself, you will not have peace. I'm moving my keyboard because it keeps making weird sounds and I don't know why it's doing that. Do you want to have peace? No more hiding places. It's kind of as simple as that. Okay. Let me see if there's anything else I want to tell you. Okay. I'm curious, actually. So this is a question to you. I would like to do a bonus session for you on sacred geometry and the shadow, as it relates to a concept known as the 0-point field. That is the ultimate stillness. The 0-point field is the field where you recognize that the part is the whole, that you are in fact the entire universe. You are the microcosm. You are the small universe, and outside of you is the big universe, but there's no difference. You are part of it. It is part of you. That is a perspective that gets developed when you really start to work with sacred geometry. And so if you guys are interested, I would be curious to create something of a bonus class for you. It would take me a little while, but it would connect sacred geometry to our map, overlay maybe the platonic solids here to help you understand how you could activate these energies, not just think about them intellectually, because that's the one fear I have about this class. I don't want it to be too intellectual. You can't think your way through this shit. You have to meditate your way through this shit. You have to work with your crystals through this shit. You have to engage your olfactory senses and smell your way through this shit. You got to draw your way through this shit. You got to, make art through this shit, right? Which is why we're using all these different modalities. So today is the intellectual piece, and I will be honest with you, that's my comfort zone. Is the intellectual. I find comfort there, but I also have to help you recognize that that's one way of learning and one way of knowing, and a lot of times it's not the best way of learning. Okay, so we are going to start by talking about the gifts of the archetypes. So if you want to take notes, this is a good time to start. We're going to start with the light archetypes. So I am going to take my light candle. Candles are important because, and by the way, this is what I do. So I have a plate here. I go underneath. See your wick? I'm going to teach you something right now. Let's see if I can get that out of there. You can use the point of a generator to kind of pull it out. You're trying to get your wick out of your candle. Well, I can make more of a mess than I'm solving here. Let me see if I can just light it. So there's a wick underneath there. You light it and wait for it to catch flame, and it will start to drip wax down, and then you can attach into the wet wax. You can attach your candle, and it won't move. That's my little trick. Whenever you see me with my candle plate, it's because I have burned the bottom of my candle and then affixed it to the wet wax, and that keeps it stable and stationary as a working tool. Okay, so we're first going to go back and recap on all the light archetypes. So there's our candle. It says light. It's a little tricky to see the lighting here because we've got full daylight happening here. Okay, the light archetypes. If you remember from last time, this is going to be a quick review because we've got so much to cover today, and I don't want to spend too much time in any one place, but I want to make sure we get to all the information too for you. Okay, so these are the light archetypes from last time. Remember, there's 12 light archetypes and 12 shadow archetypes, and each one has a gift. It's the gift that archetype brings you for you to work with. So if you remember the first light archetype, since we're working with our light, is the innocent. Okay, and the gift of the innocent archetype is trust. And if you remember, going back to our grid, the innocent archetype is in the east. So we're going to go through those really quickly. So it's one of the eastern light archetypes. And so the gift of the innocent is optimism. The innocent is the fool, right? Starting out on the fool's journey. And if that's one of your light archetypes, what's beautiful about the innocent is that the innocent hasn't become jaded yet, right? So the innocent believes, the innocent is willing to trust. The innocent's looking for the good in the world, and it's looking for evidence of that good because it wants to reinforce, it wants to trust. And so that's its gift. It trusts in the goodness of those around them. The orphan is the next light archetype. And the orphan is here. The orphan is here basically to learn how not to be alone, right? And so because they are alone, or they feel alone, they feel like they're here without a broader support network. And that can be an orphan who doesn't have parents. It can be a person who does have parents, but then in later life finds themselves alone. We get orphaned at different times. In later life, when our parents pass away, we become an orphan once again. And so the gift of the orphan, if you think about it, the orphan really is the hermit from the major arcana of the tarot. And so what is the gift of the hermit? The hermit has the light. The hermit is finding the path. The hermit is unafraid to go first. The hermit knows that the light within is its most powerful resource. The orphan also, because it's alone and because it has to learn how to navigate being alone in this lifetime, also has an incredible gift of insight. If you're an orphan, right, if you've had to figure a lot of things out for yourself, don't you have the gift of insight? Haven't you figured out how to take information and make sense of it? I think you have, because you haven't had a translator. People who have parents and partners and those around them who could do that translation work for them, they've never had to figure out how to do it themselves. And so and I consider myself an orphan to a certain extent. There were lots of periods in my life where I didn't have the sort of immediate resources that I probably should have had, if you think about like what we're kind of like owed as children or as adolescents. And so I had to figure out a lot of shit for myself. And I think that ultimately ended up helping me. It was a gift, because now I'm resourceful. I know how to figure out what I need. I know that I can carry my own light. I don't need anybody else to light the way for me. And in fact, I can trust my intuition. Those are all the gifts of the orphan. The hero archetype is here to inspire us. And so the gift of the hero archetype is inspiration. They're here to teach us like how beautiful life can be, what it means to win the game, right? What it means to succeed on behalf of the collective, and what it means to help others, right? The hero is the one who at the end of the journey has fulfilled the quest, right? And so the hero is here to inspire us. The caregiver archetype, and again, a lot of you are here as caregivers, that gift obviously is safety and comfort. You're here to make other people feel safe, and you're here to provide comfort for other people who either can't find it for themselves or for whatever reason have lost it. And there are different times in our life when we have that caregiver essence around us in the form of another person, or sometimes it's ourselves who are giving care to ourselves, and then sometimes we lose it. And so these are iterative, right? This isn't a linear path where you go from one archetype to the next and it's very neat and orderly. It's like you can swim in and out of all of these archetypes. The gift of the explorer archetype is expansion. The explorer is here to try it. We all have a little bit of that too, don't we? I have a lot of that. And I think it's some to some extent is connected to your astrology for sure. The explorer is connected to sun sign Sagittarius, and it finds itself in the southern quadrant. And so there is a connection between astrology for sure and the archetypes and their gifts. The explorer's gift is expansion. The rebel's gift is freedom. We love rebels in our life because they're the bad boys and bad girls, right? And they look so free and they look so uninhibited and unencumbered, right? Like the whole world is their oyster. And so that is the gift of those particular archetypes. The lover archetype, the gift is passion and connection, because they're here to be in physical relationship. And that is a huge gift, right, to everybody who engages with the lover archetype. The creator archetype, the gift is expansion. The creator is here to make something new. And when they do that, they push out and they extend what already exists. Think about Pele in Hawaii. She's the ultimate embodiment right now of this creator archetype. And in fact, through her recent lava flow, right, she is actually starting to manifest a small island. And so, and this was destined, by the way. It gives me goosebumps when I talk about it, but there is a destiny to the Hawaiian island chain that it will continue to perpetuate itself. It is Mu. It is the mother civilization. I spend a lot of time there. I know a lot of you do too. We all feel like we're going home. You know, one day I hope to finish my life there and be laid to rest there. It is where I feel home. And so a lot of us feel that creator archetype is really active in our lives, and we see a really beautiful physical example of it in the work that Pele is doing on the Hawaiian island chain. And by the way, keep in mind, sometimes creation is messy and deadly, right? Pele is creating something new. And Hawaiians, for the most part, see Pele as this really benevolent creator goddess, right? As long as you're in Pele's favor, you're not, you know, robbing her lands, you're not hurting her people. She's this benevolent creative force. She wants to be generative. But sometimes the way we have to create is by destroying something else, like by destroying what is old to make way for what can be new. The jester archetype, the gift is humor, right? Haha, right? The jester. When it gets to the shadow archetype, the jester moves from the jester to the trickster. If you remember this from session 1 in our bonus material as well. And so with the jester, the joke is on him, right? It's making fun, but he can teach us humor because it's funny because it's not about us. When the jester becomes the trickster and takes on a shadow archetype, then the joke is on us, and that's not as funny. And so the gift is different. The ruler archetype, the gift is strength, right? We love the idea, even in the major arcana of the tarot, of a powerful paternal ruler figure who provides strength and good boundaries. The magician archetype brings inspiration and advancement. The magician learns to use his tools. That's my life path, and a lot of you have that life path too. It's a leadership life path, one of learning to use the tools and the resources and gifts that you've been given in this lifetime to make a better way for the future. And then the sage, the final archetype, light archetype, the gifts are wisdom and learning, education, intellectual expansion, and so forth. So we give thanks for all of the gifts of the light, which manifest themselves in many ways for each of us across dimensions, time, space, hemispheres of the world. And so we give thanks for the gift of our light. May it continue to illuminate our path and be a source of illumination for others. Amen, aho, and so it is. Just watching that smoke. There is something so magnificent about it that never ceases to amaze me. North and west for me today for the light. Wisdom and emotional connection. That feels really good. Okay. And then we're going to talk about our shadow gifts. And so grab your shadow candle. And by the way, anytime you're doing light work, light your light candle. Anytime you're doing shadow work, light your shadow candle. Those are your tools for the whole season, right? There we go, into that wick. I'm just gonna burn it down a little bit, let some of that you see it? And then it just goes right in there and it sits right in that wax and it dries and hardens so it doesn't go anywhere. And then lighting our shadow candle as we talk about the gifts of the shadow. Okay. Shadow candle didn't want to stay put there for a minute. Okay, we're good now. Okay, so the gifts of the shadow. These are the shadow archetypes, and these are the gifts that they bring. So just kind of one by one, making notes as you go. If you'd like to have this information, some of you wanted it more than others, and so you can just listen if that's how you prefer to take in the information. Okay. The cynic. So the innocent, each one of the shadow archetypes, if you remember from last time, is the light archetype becoming its shadow expression. The innocent, who believes everyone, who trusts everyone, who, is kind of taking life on life's terms, becomes the cynic. And whereas the innocent's gifts are optimism and trust, the cynic's gift is protection. When the cynic is cynical, it's trying to keep you from falling prey, from falling victim to something. So the cynic says, don't you believe him? He's not telling the truth. And even though that's a shadow gift, they believe, those who activate that shadow energy believe that they're keeping you from falling victim or prey to something, okay? You even see it sometimes in metaphysical circles. People are like, oh, don't believe that, sage goddess, or don't believe those people. Crystals are just a whole bunch of bunk, And so that is a shadow gift, is the cynic is trying to keep you safe, at least from their perspective. And so, and part of what this information gives you is a way to communicate. So to the cynics in my life, what I usually like to say is, it's really kind of you. And I think your goal is to try and protect me, right? Because I think you are worried about whether I would be victimized or fall victim or fall prey to something. And so I want to encourage you. I have my own gifts of discernment. I've been through multiple lifetimes. I do a lot of my own research and homework. So thank you so much for looking out for me. But I just want you to know, because sometimes the shadow, sometimes it's manipulative. Sometimes they don't really care about you. Sometimes the cynic is saying stuff just because the cynic is in shadow, and what do they care? When people are in shadow and their intention is just to spew shadow because they don't have boundaries and they're not concerned about that, I don't always give everybody the benefit of the doubt. And there are people who just spew stuff to spew it. It's almost like what's inside of them is so dark and so viscous and so thick and old and it's making them sick, but they can't see it. And so they're just there going, you shouldn't trust that. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't listen to that. You shouldn't go there. And you should, it's just like, they're like walking, talking judgment. And you can see the effect it has, right? Like those people tend to be unhappy and tend to be kind of like, it's a troll mentality almost in social media. If you think about it, like, oh, that person and that person. And I mean, I've had people, because I'm lucky enough, like when people troll me, I get screenshots and stuff. And I've actually had people send me screenshots where people are saying, she went on vacation with her family. You know what I mean? Look at that. How she just goes on vacation with her family. And it's like, most people go on vacation with their family. And so I don't know. But again, to a person like that who's in shadow, it's going to be a trigger. How dare she go on a vacation? She shouldn't relax. You know what I mean? Like you see that stuff all the time. I don't know how it plays out in your life, but that's the kind of stuff where you have to stop and acknowledge, right? Stop, drop, and recognize. Remember that from the 80s, stop, drop, and roll when there's a fire? Stop, drop, and recognize that some people are so stuck in their own shadow that they can't see it. And they're so stuck in the projection, and they're so stuck in they're so used to living with pain, right? They've had fibromyalgia for 30 years, so they don't even realize that their shadow has just destroyed their ability to live in comfort without pain, right? So it's like none of that shit's going to make sense to them anyway. Move on. The one thing, there's a really beautiful book about how to live a good life, and it's written by Epictetus, who's an ancient, Roman philosopher. It was originally written in Latin, but it's been translated, right? And you can get it on Amazon. It's just a fun little book. But one of the wisest pieces of wisdom that I would say that Epictetus gives as an ancient philosopher that can help us today, right, in modern times to handle people. What Epictetus says is, don't ever try to convince people that you're right and they're wrong. If people have a really strong sense about something, like, you're wrong about that, the best thing to do, because anybody who would say that is so closed-minded that you're not going to convince them otherwise. That's not a person who can hold duality. That's a person in shadow, or a person with a limited intellectual capacity to hold information. And so if you try to arm wrestle with those people and say, no, I'm right and you're wrong kind of thing, you're never going to convince them, and you're going to end up so exhausted. And so what Epictetus says is, if somebody actually says to you, you're wrong on every count, here's why, and I just don't like you, and you shouldn't do that, why are you going on vacation? The best thing Epictetus says you can do is just say, thank you so much, and move on. Because in trying to prove that someone is wrong, you will expend so much personal energy with no result that it will result in you turning into them. That by trying to convince them, you can become them. Isn't it interesting, that wisdom and how that works? So I share that with you. Sending love to the siren. Sometimes you may wonder why you don't see, you see me in social, people will say things. And you probably ask yourself, why doesn't Athena say anything? Now you know my underlying philosophy. When I see people so mired in shadow, and I see hundreds of them every day. They're so fucking mired, they're not ever getting out. I mean, unless they really stop, drop, and recognize and work. I mean, I feel for them, but I have no desire to try and help that at all. And I think it's good for you to get out of that pattern as well, too. Okay, the explorer seeks expansion. The rebel seeks freedom. The caregiver, so we talked about the orphan and the victim, right? The orphan becomes either the victim or the bully, right? So the orphan is the archetype that's saying, you know, I'm here to light my own way. I'm here to develop insight. The orphan becomes either the victim or the bully. And ironically, that is a huge transformation. For someone who feels alone and is trying to connect, to become a bully who actually consciously and actively excludes others is a real manifestation of the shadow. The bully manifestation of the shadow is one of the most powerful. Begins in childhood, extends through adulthood. There are lots of adult bullies, and it is absolute shadow manifestation. And I will tell you that other than arguing with them, which gets you into a perpetual sort of loop of, you know, loss of consciousness, I think the best thing you can do with a bully is just wish them well and hope that at some point they decide to do their shadow work. Bullies are people who all they know how to do is project it. You're this, you're that, you're this, you're that, you're this, you're that. And if you look at the this and that with the bully, it's literally everything they are. And it's sad sometimes when they can't see it, but that's how that goes. By the way, the bully's gift, ironically, is protection. They are trying to protect, but the person they're really trying to protect is themselves. The bully is not really trying to protect you. The bully kind of can't give a shit about you. You are accidentally in the path of someone who's trying to protect themselves. And when a bully says, see that person, how dumb they are, or how ugly they are, or how not magical they are, or how, you know, whatever, what they're actually saying is, I'm all those things. And I would rather that you see it in this person over here, because then you won't look at me, than for me to say, whoa, I'm actually really empty and ugly and alone. So it's much easier to project that. The hero who's here to inspire us becomes the villain who's here to disrupt us. Villains, it's hard to see sometimes because it's like, well, what could the gift of a villain be, right? But villains do have gifts. And one of the things that villains do is they disrupt the status quo. And I have to tell you, I have a certain appreciation for that, even in my own life. Like when people come along and they sort of push me and test my boundaries and stuff, sometimes I'm conscious enough to say, I think they're trying to make me better. I think they're trying to make my process better. I think they're trying to make my, improve the way I see this situation. I think they're trying, maybe not consciously, they may not care about me personally at all, but I think they're part of an evolutionary process that's here to try and advance me on my path. And so if I can see it that way, it's actually not about them at all. It's more about, am I able to discern the wisdom and the lesson in order to work with it? And so villains do disrupt, and through their disruption, they create change and they shift paradigms. I mean, it's not pleasant, but let me tell you something. The universe wouldn't necessarily work through villains if we paid attention. Remember, the universe tries to get your attention first by whispering to you, and then by talking to you, and then it yells at you. But it started off by whispering to you, hey, could you change this? And so sometimes, I'll tell you, like candidly with Sage Goddess, sometimes when people come along and they've got like a dark vibe and they're you know, being disruptive, I'll pay attention and say, am I supposed to fix something? Is there something in my process? Is there something in my, oops, I just dropped a bunch of notes. I'll get them later. Is there something in my process or what I'm doing or how I'm doing it that needs evaluation? Because this person is showing up as a mirror to me of some things that I'm doing that maybe aren't in greater alignment, broader alignment with the work that I'm supposed to be doing here. So I always pay attention to that. Again, it has to do less more usually with the person than with the energy stream. Caregivers, right, who bring safety and comfort become the dark mother who's here to strengthen you. The dark mother is not a nurturing caregiver. She is the shadow element of the good mother, right? The dark mother is like, you figure it out for yourself. You're gonna, does not provide. But the dark mother still teaches us by teaching us how to be self-aware and how to be resilient and how to mother ourselves through life, which ultimately becomes a survival skill. The explorer in the light archetype becomes the sheltered soul. And so whereas the explorer's gift is expansion, the sheltered soul's gift is protection. Again, the sheltered soul's job is to say, don't get too crazy, don't do scary things, don't go jump off a building, don't go, it's like the sheltered soul's here to keep you kind of like small and contained because it wants you to be safe. It still is coming from that place. The rebel, who's here to create freedom, becomes the officer, who's here to create structure. So whereas the rebel's here like, yeah, we're going to try it all, we're going to do it all, we're going to experience it all, the officer's here going, that's fine, you have until sundown, and you can't go over there, and you shouldn't do this. Like, the officer's got a whole list of things you shouldn't do, which is here to create boundaries and structure for you. The lover is here. The lover's light archetype gifts are passion and connection. The lover can become, in the shadow, the abuser. And the abuser arrives, those of you who've been through abusive and traumatic situations before can probably understand this well. The abuser arrives to engender in you a deep sense of compassion for the human condition, right? So, and it's not easy to see when you're young. And by the way, I'm not saying anyone ever should be abused. I'm not excusing that behavior at all. But if you're looking for the gift of it, those who have been abused often will say that they learned to have compassion. It wasn't the way they wanted to learn it. I mean, some of the lessons we learn from the shadow gifts are shitty lessons, and I my heart bleeds because I've had to learn some of them too, and they're not pleasant, right? But it's like, it's this big fabric that we're here to work with. We're not just here to work with what's easy in that fabric. We're here to work with the whole thing. The creator archetype, who's here with expansion as a gift, becomes the destroyer archetype, who again is here to create disruption and change. So one who creates, builds something beautiful and new, and that's wonderful, but one who destroys, sometimes, if you use the law of a metaphor, in the process of destroying what is beautiful, can create something new that is beautiful too. And that newness wouldn't exist without that capacity to destroy what's old. The jester becomes the trickster. We talked about this. The trickster was where the joke's on you. That's the shadow archetype that makes jokes, but it's like, gosh, that's not funny. You know what I mean? Like that hurt my feelings kind of thing. What the trickster does is get you to do personal growth and develop a thick skin. Did you have a trickster brother or sister? Because I did. And so when the joke's always on you, at a certain point, it's like, haha, that's why, I'm self-deprecating all the time. And so when people make fun of me sometimes, like, I can totally roll with that because I can see, like, yeah, I do that, or, like we're all human. I have no problem making fun of the things that I do that are funny, right? But it's like, you have to be part of that joke. You have to be evolved enough, mature enough to be able to participate in that. If you're young, it can be very disruptive to your psyche to have someone making fun of you when your identity is still developing. So again, I'm not saying it's okay to make fun of anybody, but in service of understanding that there is a gift, and that the person who, when the joke becomes on you, you have two choices, right? You can stand there and just cry, and I've done that too, where it's like, really? Like, that's not funny. That really hurt my feelings. Or you can sit there and go, you know what? I'm everybody else. And so if that's funny about me, it's actually funny about everybody. And put it back in that framework of we're all one, we're all connected. The ruler, whose gift is strength, becomes the dictator, whose gift is the setting of parameters. Dictators, their primary goal is to experience control. And so in order to experience control, a dictator has to put parameters around everything and everyone. And so that's how they work. Rulers, who are here to gift strength, become the dictator with the parameters. The magician, who's here to inspire us and push us to advance and to learn to use our tools and to become something more than we are today, becomes the sorcerer we talked about. The sorcerer is here to shift paradigms. The sorcerer is here sometimes with dark magic, but sometimes not. Sorcerers sometimes are here to use tools outside of the traditional toolbox in order to facilitate and accelerate the ascension of a people or a planet. And so, again, sorcery, you can look and say, well, that could be dark magic and could be manipulative, but it could also be, the use of magic in intended specific ways can be used to help move the planet toward ascension and to shift paradigms. The sage, whose gifts are wisdom and learning, can become the judge. right? Remember, the sage is open-minded. All paths are welcome here. The shadow of that is not everybody's welcome. Some people are right, some people are wrong, right? The sage can become closed-minded in the shadow. But the gift of that is boundaries and protection. The judge is just creating a container that is safe. And so it's like, oh, here are the boundaries, here are the limits, this is to keep you safe, right? So the judge could be saying, look, that sage needs tighter boundaries around spiritual work, or that sage needs, more science to back up their metaphysical assertions, for example. And those are still gifts. And what prevents us from seeing the shadow gifts as gifts, you guys, sometimes is our own resistance. We like things the way they are. We like people who tell us we're right. We like theories that affirm what we know. But the reality is we don't always learn best that way. But the problem is, and this is something that I think a lot of you will understand as I move into the quadrants now. So we're going to spend the next 45 minutes on quadrants. We'll get as far as we can today, and then we'll just pick up either with a bonus session or in session 3 with the rest of the information. A lot of times shadow teachers don't try to be good teachers because they're angry. They don't realize they're in shadow. So they're just expressing whatever their shadow emotion is. They're angry, they're resentful, they're jealous, they're sad, they're, whatever it is. And they're communicating from that place, but not with intention. They're not saying, I really want to teach her that. They're just saying, I don't like her and I want to stop that. Or I really want to help him move past that blind spot. But they're just saying, well, I'm just going to show him how he's wrong. If everybody could be more conscious, the light teachers and the shadow teachers, everything would happen in service of greater learning. The problem is, when we're in shadow, we tend to be living in a blind spot. And then what happens, and again, I have a lot of experience with this because a lot of people project onto me, especially people who don't know me, right? But I'm a teacher and I'm a spiritual teacher, and so I kind of accept it. But I do wish sometimes that people would also, what tends to happen is people will project onto me and then they'll come back 3 months later, 6 months later and say, I'm sorry. You know what I mean? Like, I totally was rude to you, or I talked bad behind your back, or I did all this stuff and I really shouldn't have done that, and I'm really, really sorry. And what I usually say is, be well on your path, you know what I mean? I wish you all the best, and may you, find what you're looking for, kind of thing. But it'd be really nice if while they were in that shadow place, if they could see themselves as consciously enough. So because the shadow tends to be repressed, and when it emerges, it tends to be subconscious. What I'm kind of hoping you guys will do is take a little more ownership of your shadow. Enough to say, this is coming up, and I almost feel like it could be helpful for the person it's coming up for. And so can I actually move from a place of teaching and wanting to support rather than just projecting all over somebody like a jerk? Can I feel into what this is? And maybe this is actually usable light, but it's coming up from my shadow self. And so is this making sense to you at all? Like, I want you to see that this is the goal. The goal is not for you to not have shadow emotions anymore. Fuck that. That's repression. That is BS. That is you pretending to be someone that you're not. My goal is that when you do feel resentful, when you do feel angry, when you do feel jealous, when you do feel spiteful, when you do feel sad, like full of despair, my hope is that if that feels like it connects with anyone else, that you will actually stop and say, how can I have that conversation in a productive way that doesn't just make that person feel like I'm just, projecting my shit all over them, and actually isn't just a projection, that actually is a usable way to communicate what I think is valid information. That, if you guys get to that place, that's integration. That's integration. And so when someone says to me, I'm upset about something, and I need to tell you about it, it's like, gosh, my whole heart just opens, because I can feel that they have developed a self-awareness about what's upsetting them. And so when they come to me, it's from a pure place of like, soul to soul, can we communicate? because I don't know what it is that I'm feeling, and you may not know either, but I feel like there's something in it for you that might be helpful for you down the road. I will tell you something. I haven't had that conversation yet in my lifetime with somebody who's in shadow, but I'm holding space for it because I would love it. 99% of the time it's F you and F that and you know what I mean? But I'm holding space that someone could actually get to a place where they're feeling the shadow stuff coming up and they say, I'm going to work with it. I'm going to dialogue about it. I'm going to meditate on it. I'm going to sit with it. I'm going to draw a picture of it. I'm going to paint it. I'm going to breathe it into a container and throw it away. I'm going to, do you know? Okay, let's begin in the east, shall we? Let's begin in the east. Direction of east governs the spirit. The energy of east is sensing. These are energies of breath, life, and conception. The Jungian archetypes associated with the east are the creator, the hero, and the innocent. These are all breath of life archetypes that are open to new experiences. The Myers-Briggs archetypes are the doer, inspector, nurturer, and performer that are aligned with the ESTP, ESFP, ISTJ, and ISFJ personas, element of air. And these are sun signs Libra, Aquarius, and Gemini. Okay. I'm going to try to go through this in as organized a way as I can. Just take notes. And if we need to go back through and clarify anything, we can absolutely do that and have discussions in the group. I'm going to tell you overall, I'm going to talk to you about Pluto in the different houses, astrological houses, when we're done. Hopefully we'll get there today. But Pluto affects the air signs this way. Pluto is the planet that governs transformation, change. It represents the underworld. It represents your shadow. Pluto is all of the unexpressed feelings, desires, and needs that are still active in your field. And in the air signs, okay, with the air signs, Pluto expresses that transformation energy through thoughts, relationships, and social change. So if you are in the Eastern Quadrant, either by your astrology or by your Myers-Briggs types, then you experience transformation energies primarily through thoughts, relationships, and social change. Okay, element of air. So let's start with the ESTP. So just to get us going in the east, I'm going to spray my beautiful sensing mist. To get on my papers. I lost my papers. Your sensing mist for spirit is lavender, lemongrass, and rosewood. These are pure. So miss that just to give yourself the scent connection. Isn't that beautiful? There's something about lavender and lemongrass that blows my mind. Talk about like upper chakra, solar plexus opening. That's all those energies of those oils. Okay, and then you also have your air stones, which are citrine, tiger's eye, and golden labradorite. So if you want to hold your stones, if this is your quadrant, you can hold your stones while I describe you to you. Okay, if you are an ESTP, then I am about to talk to you about you. You are the doer. You are the freedom lover. You're the fixer. You're the adventurer. And you live in the Eastern Quadrant. You sense things from all directions. You're gathering information through your fingertips. You're gathering it through your skin. You're gathering it through what you hear. You're gathering it through your mind. You're gathering it through your eyes. ESTPs tend to be exhausted at the end of the day because they're out there. They're the doers. They're fixing everything. This tends to be an archetype associated with sales because a lot of times the ESTPs are so enthusiastic about things in their lives that they just want other people to experience them and enjoy them, and so they're very persuasive salespeople in terms of how they pitch things to people. So just describing more about you if you're an ESTP. And so remember too that the where you are across, okay? So if you are, we're starting in the East with sensing, you are in some ways you're the opposite of the West intuiting. The West uses primarily their intuition to gain information. So they're primarily using their extra sensory perception. In the East, you're using all of your primary senses, touch, taste, hearing. You're much more likely to be persuaded, those of you in the Eastern quadrant, through something that you can prove, right? I can touch this, I can hold it, I can count this, I can quantify this. In the West, because I'm in the West, we don't need all that. We're like, I'll take your intuition. That's much more accurate. But in the East, you want more proof. ESTPs, you're active, you're fun, spur of the moment, you're impulsive. You're the ones who say, let's go. Let's go do this. Let's go try this. Let's go create this. You really do like to be the center of attention. You are an extrovert, right? I and E, I represents introversion, E represents extroversion. You're willing to do anything to get attention, especially when you're younger and you're not as developed, right? As you get a little older, you're not as willing to do anything to get attention, but you're still willing to put yourself out there. And your most admired quality, if you're an ESTP, what you appreciate most in other people is strength. It's kind of the thing you wish you had. You don't have a lot of physical strength as an ESTP. Your strength is more intellectual, and so you wish you had sort of the physical chops to back it up. And so sometimes your shadow can reflect that you wish you had a stronger physical constitution. Okay, so that is ESTP. If you're ESFP, the performer, and by the way, all of the Eastern quadrant profiles respond to those stones. So if you if you're looking and you're saying, I really think that I'm more drawn to the citrine or more drawn to your tiger's eye, just kind of go with your gut instinct. I put the stones there, leaving it sort of up to you to choose which one really seems to resonate with the type that you are. If you're an ESFP, okay, so rather than thinking, you're feeling, okay, there's ESTP and ESFP. The difference between thinking and feeling between ESTP and ESFP is the difference between the salesperson and the party girl. Okay, the ESFP is a party. You are the performer, the entertainer. You're a people person, and you want what's new. You want new ideas, new dances, new experiences, new relationships, new partners. You're into the new. You're a little bit of a socialite because you do have a philanthropic streak. So you do like what's new, but you also want it to be something that helps people. All of you in the East feel this this drive to be of service, and so you do want to make sure that people are being supported. You're mischievous, you're upbeat, you like to entertain, and you have a lot of energy to express. And so you're usually the ESFPs are either up early or they stay up late, and they tend to be night people. But I have known ESFPs who've been morning people too. And so that is you, party girl. ISTJs, which are in the East, ISTJ, sensing, thinking, judging, right? This is more of an intellectual profile. Very different from the other two profiles. I refer to this one as the accountant. This is somebody who really likes to have control of their facts. You are someone who would like to be maybe a secretary. You like being in a supportive role where you have facts, data, information. You're very bound to duty, you're very bound to service, and you are an introverted thinker. You are somebody whose wheels are constantly turning. You only make decisions based on facts. You do not make decisions based on your intuition. That's why, in some ways, it is an opposite thing. Because over in the Western quadrant, we're all up in there going, I think this is what my intuition is telling me, so I'm going to make my decision based on that. And over in the East, they're like, are you kidding me right now? So you guys like to have data to support your decisions. Bound to tradition, the way things always have been, and the way things always have been done. You don't like to change things just to change things, and you don't like to change things just to have something new, because innovation doesn't drive you. You're very resistant to innovation, in fact, because one of the biggest fears of this profile is change. You're afraid of it because you're worried on some level it might make you obsolete. So if you can let go of that fear, then you'll be much more likely to embrace change and see the change, the gifts that change can provide to you as well. And then last profile in the Eastern Quadrant is the ISFJ. ISFJ, sensing, feeling, judging. So this is different from ISTJ because the TJs are thinking, the FJ is feeling, right? It's a totally different worldview. This is the mediator. This is the nurturer, the philanthropist, the cooperative. This is the sensitive team builder in your organization who wants to make sure everybody's on the same page, really want to make sure people are connecting. Very good with people, very good in small group settings. Again, you have introversion here, not extroversion. So these are not people who want to go be life of the party. This is not the ESTP, right? This is not the freedom-loving, I'm going to go do it, I'm going to dance on the table profile. This is more of an introvert who really wants to be in service to people. Easily embarrassed, especially if it's something serious. This is, it's hard because I can't be embarrassed. Isn't that funny? I don't remember. I don't think I've ever been embarrassed in my life. My mom used to ask me, were you ever embarrassed of me as a kid? And I looked at her and I almost teared up and I said, I've never been embarrassed of you. And my mom was always kind of embarrassed of herself. She always kind of felt like she wasn't as nicely dressed as the other moms or whatever it was. And so when I told her that, it really meant a lot to her. But I don't get embarrassed. Like, you can't, if you say something weird, it's not going to embarrass me. If you act weird, it's not going to embarrass me because I've kind of seen everything. But ISFJs, man, you embarrass them and they may not spend time with you again, which is why I don't have a lot of ISFJ friends, because I can embarrass them. And I feel really badly about that. Like, I'm trying in my life to be less embarrassing to people. Like, I just spontaneously dance sometimes, or I swear, or I believe in weird things, or I talk about aliens, and it can really throw ISFJs off a lot. But here's the thing with ISFJs and why I love them so much, why they are the mediators. They're always going to look for the collective highest good. ISFJs are always going to look across that table and say, is everybody being served? Can't just be you, but to look and say everybody's needs are being met in that equation. And that is the Eastern Quadrant. Now, if you have your moon in Aquarius, in Gemini, or in Libra, your moon placement, and again, we're really touching the surface here with this class. If you guys love this, we'll go more deeply. We could do a whole bonus session just on the moon, sometime before December. So just know, like, there's always more behind this. I try to give you, like, the buffet, and, like, put little bits on your plate, but I'm scratching the surface of things, right? And so when your moon is in an air sign, when it's Libra, Gemini, Aquarius, the moon is always about the subterranean within you. It's your subconscious needs. It's your subconscious desires. It's the things that make you tick is your moon. And it's also the things that you have to be happy. My moon is in Sagittarius, and that is the sign of the occult and hidden knowledge. I cannot be happy in my life without access to hidden wisdom and the occult. I can't. I mean, I've tried. There was a time in my life where I tried to, like, stop being spiritual altogether because I kept having experiences that freaked me out. My mom was a channel and seeing, we had alien visitations. And so there was a time in my life where I was like, forget this. I'm going to go be a professor and, like, a scientist and get a PhD, and nobody's going to be woo-woo. Right? Because there is part of that that's sort of like, it's scary. But at the same time, my moon is in Sagittarius. I can't be happy unless I indulge that part of who I am. Same thing for you if your moon is in Libra, Aquarius, or Gemini. You cannot be happy unless you're in partnership, and you cannot be happy unless you're free, unless you have some freedom. And your freedom may need to be in the form of writing, it may need to be in the form of music, it may need to be, but you need to have intellectual freedom if you are a Libra, Gemini, or Aquarius moon. I have to tell you, at this point, I've been doing this work for so long, especially astrology, I haven't seen an outlier. I haven't seen somebody say, you know what, my moon's in Aquarius, but, like, go ahead and lock me up. You know what I mean? Or, like, my moon's in Gemini, but I don't have to talk to people to be happy. I've never seen it. So the moon placement, when it comes to your quadrant, if your moon is in one of those signs, that does tell you you're still in that quadrant. Even if all the other influences and factors pull you out. So what I want you to make a note of, because what I will do ultimately is meme this for you. So I want you to make a note of, where do you have quadrant activity and where don't you? So you might say, well, my astrology is in the south, but my light and shadow is in the west, and then I have my moon is in the north, maybe. I haven't seen a lot of people who are in all 4 quadrants for things, but I have seen a lot of people in 2 and a lot of people in 3. So don't feel weird. It just means you're multifaceted. And hello, I mean, you know that you're multifaceted, right? You know that there's so much that makes up who you are. Wouldn't you be surprised if it was simpler than that? Wouldn't you be really fucking surprised if I told you, yep, you're all in the southern quadrant, your astrology, your Pluto, your Myers-Briggs, your, spirit animals, your all of the things that go into identifying you with a quadrant? Wouldn't you kind of not believe it if it all tied up too easily? You don't tie up easily. You're as complex as shit. You know what I mean? Like, there's so much going on in you. And so the idea that we would somehow reduce it down to like one thing or 2 things, I think is sort of crazy. Okay, so now we're moving to the south in our quadrant. We were just in the east. We're moving to the south, which is the realm of feeling. It governs the body. Physical wellness and healing are yours in the south. The Jungian archetypes of the rebel, the explorer, and the orphan. The Myers-Briggs archetypes of the provider, the giver, the composer, and the idealist, with Leo, Sagittarius, and Aries as the sun and moon signs. And then the Myers-Briggs types are ESFJ, ENFJ, INFP, ISFP. If I was an extrovert, which I'm not, I would be in the southern quadrant, which would make everything line up real nice and neat for me, right? Because Leo and Sagittarius are both there. My sun sign is there. My moon sign is there. But I'm an introvert. Shocks the shit out of you, doesn't it? But I am. How do you know if you're an introvert or an extrovert? It's not just your Myers-Briggs types. Here's the question that you need to ask yourself. When you've had a hard day, this is the only question you have to ask yourself. And it's so easy for me, I could tell you in a heartbeat. When you've had a hard day, do you want to go home and get in bed or sit outside? Or do you want to go to a bar or to a public place and hang out with a bunch of people? When I've had a hard day, I don't want to see anyone. I don't want to talk to anyone. I want to be with me because I comfort me. And I need hours by myself a week in order to be happy. If I travel with people and I don't have any alone time, you're going to see me get very stressed, like primal stressed, like almost like I'm having an anxiety attack, but it's just because I've been with people too much. And so my husband is so great because we've been together forever. It's actually our 15th anniversary this week. But my husband is so great. He will actually come to me and say, just go outside, which basically means get the fuck out of here. Like, I can see what's happening to you right now. And so the kids coming to you and going, mama, 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 mama. And then your mom coming to you and saying, could you, would you, why did you? And then, somebody else coming to you and then an email and a text and a phone call. And he can even see me. Like, I start to, and he'll come to me and say, why don't you go sit down outside? And I'll say, thank you. It's like, yes, I need to be away from the people. Okay. So in the south, this is where we are. If your Pluto is in a fire sign, Leo, Sagittarius, Aries, if your Pluto finds itself in a fire sign, then you transform through knowledge. Okay, you transform through partnerships and through assertion of will. We're going to look at where Pluto is in your chart, by the way. If you're in Illumina, or were in Illumina last year, I taught you a little bit about this, but we're going to go through this too. If we don't have time to get through it tonight, like I said, I will do a special call-out bonus just focusing on whatever you guys want. If you want more Pluto, if you want more moon information, I am going to try tonight to tell you about moon in the houses. Because in my experience, like, that's what I think is going to blow your mind from this session most of all. I hope that the quadrants all make sense, but when I layer on what house in your natal chart your moon is in, that takes everything I'm talking about right now and just moves it to another level. Slowly but surely, between tonight and a bonus session in the future, before we're done in December, you're really going to know who you are. And not only that, you're going to know, I mean, if you plot the house that your moon is in, and then you plot everybody in your family, it's really funny. I mean, it tells you so much about how you communicate and what you're like under stress. It'll blow your mind. Okay. So Pluto in the fire signs, again, you transform through knowledge, partnerships, and assertion of your personal will. This is physical healing and the physical body. Okay, ESFJ is the first profile here. ESFJ in the south, where you are sensing. I'm sorry, in the south where you are feeling. You're not sensing. Air signs are sensing. They've got their antenna out and they're taking in all the information from all the places except their intuition. Remember that. In the east, it's all about information coming from all directions except your third eye. That's when you're in the west. In the south, the information is coming through your body. It's coming through your feelings. How do you feel about things? And that's why I'm a hybrid west and south, because my feelings are as important to me as my intuition. When I walk into a room, I can feel before I even intuit what's happening. And my physical body is a really accurate register for what's happening in an environment. So ESFJ, you are the provider, the cheerleader. You're very popular. The profile name I gave you was the Scout, because you're very alert and you're constantly sending out feelers in all directions. You're very emotional, and you are not afraid, by the way. ESFJs, because you're extroverts and you're all about the feelings, but you're judgmental, right? Like, there is a line. You don't mind having people know what you're feeling or what you're thinking. You're sort of open about that. You're a little bit neurotic, but you're very protective. You get exhausted. ESFJs are one of the profiles that come to me, and they are in a state usually of some kind of adrenal fatigue or just psychic, toxicity, because information is coming to you and you're constantly trying to focus in all directions, which isn't even physically possible. And so by the time I get an ESFJ, in my office or coming across the wires to me, they're usually like, I'm burned, I'm fried. I can't help anybody else. I can't talk to anybody else. And it's because they've waited too long. ESFJs really think if they just try a little harder, if they wait a little longer, they'll figure it out. And because they're the Scout and they have their feelers in all directions, it's like, I think you guys are just waiting for it. And then when you realize that you can't just wait for it, you know what I mean? Like, more information isn't better. It's not like having all access to all that is going to satisfy you. That's when change begins. And then ENFJ, right, which is the difference between, working more with your feelings versus your intuition, which is me as an extrovert. So this is my profile. ENFJ is my profile if I was more extroverted and not as introverted as I am. They are the givers, the teachers, and the dreamers. And teacher is the profile name that I've given you. You love to teach people new things. ENFJs, you were born to teach. And because you have a better personality than I do, because you're more extroverted, I'm more introverted. So I think I have a great teaching persona, and I've taught myself to be more extroverted, but my home instinct is to go within. Yours is to go without. So you're very accurate in how you read people. And because you're out in the world so much as an extrovert, you have a lot of opportunity to read people. You put other people's needs first, but you can be very easily hurt. INFJs and ENFJs, we're very vulnerable people. I will tell you, and I mean, I'm not saying this to you to invite you to hurt me, but I will tell you, you can hurt me. And that's because my heart is authentically open. And so there are a lot of people in public life that you can't hurt. You're not going to be able to get to them. You can't reach them, first of all, usually. And then if you can, they kind of don't care what you think, right? And it's not so much that I care what you think, but I am vulnerable to you. I'm emotionally accessible to you, because I also want you to be emotionally accessible to me too. I'm trying to create healing work in the world and raise the planetary consciousness and vibration. So I can't do that with a closed heart and a closed mind, but the fact that I am open to you means that I could be hurt. And it's the same with ENFJs, especially with ENFJs, because INFJs are still part of us that's off limits, because we're sort of like, We've had some experiences. ENFJs are like, forget it. I'm going to be all vulnerable to you. I'm going to open my little crab claws and you can do what you're going to do. So be careful, ENFJs, that you don't get hurt. Most ENFJs will tell you they wouldn't have it any other way. They don't mind. Because their vulnerability to them is one of the most important parts of their authenticity. And for me it is too. You'll hear me say that very often too. Okay, ISFP. This is the rebel profile. You are here in the Southern Quadrant. You are the composer. You love new experiences, new music. ISFPs tend to be very responsive to music. It moves their body. It moves their soul. They're slow to warm up. They're not the movers and shakers. They're not working the room. They are not the socialites, and the ones really working the room are the ESTPs. This is a different profile. The ISFPs are not doing that. The ISFPs are testing boundaries, even physical limitations. And they're what we call the introverted extroverts. Okay? You are ISFP, you are introverted, but you do like to interact. So there's a lot of ISFPs who are like, gosh, it says I'm introverted, but I think I'm extroverted. And so that's a very common comment that we hear. However, the ISFPs feel like they're alone in a crowd. The ISFPs a lot of times are sad, and they don't really express that sadness except to people that they trust. Then they will allow it. Okay. Oh, this is an interesting concept. I had to make sure I could read my own writing. ISFPs, you ready? Here's an interpretation of mine that I think is useful. You have to pursue freedom, the ISFP, even if it ultimately imprisons you. I really want you to sit with that, ISFP. You have to pursue freedom, even if it ultimately imprisons you. Meaning that in pursuit of your freedom, you could actually hit other obstacles. And it's almost so important for you to pursue freedom that you're willing to pay that price. Does that make sense? It's interesting. Okay, and then INFP, which is me except, perceiving versus judging, right? You are the dreamer, and you're also a gamer. A lot of times gamers, this is my interpretation, but a lot of times my gamers fall in this category. And because my profile is so close, I almost get it. Like, there's part of me that I think could have been like a rad gamer. I'm even threatening to play Fortnite with my son because I'm like, I think I could get into it. The introvert part of me could get into it, and the intuitive part of me, right, could really enjoy it. The INFP is the dreamer, the gamer, the idealist, the introvert, the one who's reserved. The INFP has major inner conflicts that they're struggling with all the time, and they deserve your compassion. Okay, they may look like they're okay to the world, but on the inside, there's toil and there's struggle. They don't want help, but they do want appreciation of that. They do want recognition that the inner work that they're doing is valuable. And if you can see their progress, they really appreciate knowing that too. The INFPs have this massive inner struggle with good versus evil. They almost feel like it's an archetypal struggle within them. Am I good? Am I evil? Am I aligning with forces of good? Am I aligning with forces of evil? Did I spray my south spray, by the way? I don't think I did. Let me do that. Ooh. So good. So the mist, just so you know, for the fire element, I want to give you your exact EOs that we used. Clove, cedarwood, and rosemary, and it's the cedar that you smell. That's the bottom note that it sort of drops down to. And your stones, by the way, for the Southern Quadrant are sunstone, red jasper, and garnet. This is your garnet. That's almandine garnet in this beautiful raw form. This is your red jasper, and this is your sunstone. Okay, so here we go. So the INFP, as I said, I just want to make sure I went through your stones and your essential oils. That good versus evil dilemma that's inside of them is real deal. And they're going to struggle. And they may look to you for cues or for feedback. This is one of the profiles. The INFP profile really, really likes feedback. And because they live so much in the realm of imagination, sometimes they're looking for what I call the reality check. These are profiles that sometimes will put themselves in positions that seem like positions of hardship, but it's really because they want to experience reality and be able to discern between what is a product of their conscious mind, their analytical mind, and their imaginative mind, so that they can discern and understand the difference. Okay. Aho, that is the south. That is the south. I've still got my shadow candle lit because we're going through all of we're going through the shadow wheel right now. So we are moving to the west. We're working our way around. We started in the east, just like I always do with ritual. So we are now in the west, which is intuiting. I'm going to frame mine, by the way. I'm excited for you to frame yours too. I'm going to do some kind of like fun mat and beautiful frame for mine. So now that I'm done teaching it to you, I'm going to mat it and hang it. And I encourage you to do the same. My intention is that this is a beautiful art piece that you can keep in your house, that people will come over and go, oh, what is that? And you can kind of teach them and help them understand. So this is intuiting in the West. Governs the heart, intuitive wisdom, inner knowing. The Jungian archetypes are here. So they're the magician, lover, and the caregiver. The Myers-Briggs archetypes are the visionary, mastermind, counselor, and champion. And the sun signs are Cancer, Pisces, Scorpio. That's also indicative of Pluto in water signs, would also register here. And then ENTP, INTJ, INFJ, ENFP, and water. I told you this before, but some of you might be new. My entire family and inner circle is right here. All my friends, my close friends, my husband, and my children, and me. We're all here. Oops, and my entire product team here at Sage Goddess, all in the West. Coincidence? I think not. That doesn't mean we're not like each other if you don't have that profile, right? Because certainly, if you're in the South, we have a ton in common, right? And that's my hemisphere of balance, is between West and South. Okay, which is I will tell you, this is interesting for you too. I know we're going a little bit over time, but like I said, I used to have 3 hours to teach, so it's really hard for me to try and contain something in a smaller window. Let's look at hemispheres again, right? Northern, southern hemisphere. So this is north and west. This is south and east. I'm up here, but you might be down here. This is the mother hemisphere to a certain extent. Let me put it this way. This is mother. South and west. This is father, north and air. Earth and air. So this is the maternal hemisphere. This is the paternal hemisphere. The father thinks and acts. The mother feels and delivers. Okay, gives birth. So the body and the intuition get activated with the mother as vehicles of creative potential. Okay, and the intellect governs more of the paternal, the thinking through, as opposed to the feeling through, if that makes sense. Okay, so let's go back here to west. This is us. You ready? Okay, if your Pluto is in a water sign, right, Pisces, Cancer, Scorpio, you activate your shadow energy through your intuition, through your deep inner knowing, and through your mothering, and through the mystery, right? Scorpio is the sign of the mystery. Cancer is the sign of the mother. Pisces is the sign of the imagination. So whether you indulge, right, your skills, your gifts of transformation as a Pisces through your imagination, that's how Pisces transforms. Or as a Cancer, you transform through parenting. So by giving birth or by mothering other people. Cancers don't have to give birth to mother. I'm sure you know that. Cancers mother everybody, which is really annoying if they're not your mother. I've always been very resistant to non-mother cancering mothering. It's just like, I got one of those. I'm good, okay? And then Scorpio engages the deeper mysteries. Scorpio's unafraid. They'll dig real deep and go all the way with you. So, okay, so that's how you activate transformation in your life through Pluto if you are in the water signs. Now, this is, I will say, the most metaphysical of the quadrants. If you are here, either because you are a water sign or because you are one of these Myers-Briggs profiles or by your Jungian archetypes, this is the most intuitive of the 4 quadrants. Doesn't mean the other 4 quadrants aren't great. Right? The south is more about the physicality. And the air quadrant is more about the ability to intellectualize, think through, right? But this is the feeling quadrant, which is more of the metaphysical. ENFP. Okay, this is a lot of people close to me in my life. Like I said, these profiles are very active in my own life, so I'm very familiar with them. ENFP, you are the champion, the individualist. You're friendly. You do not like bureaucracy. You are very outgoing, very fun, and very sensual. Random piece of information, ENFPs are very easily able, to receive physical pleasure. I won't go into too much detail, but they're very active sensually. They're able to enjoy themselves physically easily. They have a very pronounced wild side, and so their shadow activation can look like reckless or dramatic relationships, like hopping from one relationship to another. That's shadow, though. That's not typical of ENFPs. ENFPs are the yogis in this typology. So they're the ones who really have embodied, right? They're deeply embodying the work. I'm going to use my my Western mist for intuiting now, just to connect. By the way, the EOs in this one are eucalyptus, mandarin, and geranium. The geranium is a really powerful heart chakra essential oil, and that's kind of what you first smell. And it dries down actually nicely to a balance of the eucalyptus and the geranium. The mandarin is really more of a top note, so it's like a first hit, but it doesn't dry down. And then your stones are malachite, azurite, and lapis lazuli for the west. They're pretty, aren't they? I love the western stones too. I love all 3 of the trios. Hopefully you're enjoying them too. Okay. So ENFPs are the friendly yogis. Okay. INFT, is that right? No, INFJ, and then INTJ. I'm sorry, INFJ. This is me. I feel like I should know so much more about it because I've been it my whole life. The first time I took the Myers-Briggs, I think I was in high school. And I've always been an INFJ, so it's never changed. It's always been my typology. But I know a lot of you feel like you've changed over time, and so I'm holding a space for that. I don't exactly know how to help you reconcile that, but I do understand your perspective. INFJ is the counselor, the mystic, the first responder. That's my phraseology, by the way, but that's always how I've described myself as an INFJ. I am the first responder. If you are ever in trouble, I will come to you. And nothing shocks me, so I can see it, I can do it, I can touch it, I can move it, I can work with it. As a first responder, I am able to bypass all of my own initial reactions to understand what's needed of me in the moment. Cool under pressure, very small inner circle. INFJs, if they tell you they've got a bunch of friends, they're lying to you. I have a lot of acquaintances. I have very few friends. Like people that I spend time with. If you're my friend and I spend time with you in my daily life, like that's kind of a big deal for me. I don't have a lot of that. I'm not super trusting of people. INFJs have had bad experiences because we are so intuitive that with certain people we have seen to the bottom of them and seen through them, and so then we're like, I don't want to go through that again, right? And we've had enough of those experiences where we kind of people tend to pursue INFJs, but they don't tend to pursue people, is how that works. So the INFJs can seem aloof, but it's just because we've been really fucked over before. We're not really that aloof. We just don't trust people as much as we used to. The profile of this is the shaman or the medicine person. These are people who, INFJs are all exceptionally good writers and poets. They know how to summon emotions through words. And I will tell you, I definitely feel that that's my profile. So, okay. The ENTPs, also lots of people in my circle with this profile, are the visionaries. They need heavy mental stimulation. INFJs don't. We don't need mental stimulation. We like it, but I mean, we're our own freewheeling mental stimulation. We don't need you to provide it. ENTPs don't have their own automatic mental stimulation, so they seek it in others. They are the magical manifestors. ENTPs, like I said, are the visionaries. They are the gurus. They are extremely wise, and all they want to do is ideate and create something new and come up with a new vision, a new model, a new way of showing people something, a new way of teaching something. So that's why they are the gurus. And then the INTJ, which is my husband, is the mastermind. And he and I are off by one variable, right? I feel, he thinks. But the INTJs are much more precise creatures, and because they don't have the feeling component, they are less, what would I say? They are less persuaded by human experience. They are less empathic, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? Like those of us who are highly empathic, we're so moved by the wind, you know what I mean, that we can't often calibrate our own weather. So the INTJs are helpful that way. They are the incredible precise balance of left and right brain. They don't enjoy small talk or basic social interaction. They're looking for depth. And if you can't provide it, an INTJ is out of here. They do not waste their time at all, because they're not here for anything else. INTJs are here to figure everything out. And so if you lie to them, or if you withhold information with them, or if you try to make it too emotional, they back off, because they're trying to figure out the pieces. And what you have to recognize, it's really interesting, especially in my line of work, because I work with and I live with people from all different backgrounds and profiles, even though my nuclear family and all my close friends are all in the same quadrant, which is weird, but it's true. I still work with the other quadrants in my daily life all the time. You have to recognize is people aren't trying to trigger you. You know, when they are some other profile, or they behave in alignment with that profile, they're not trying to trigger you. That's just who they are, and they're here to be teachers for you, because if we were all the same, we wouldn't learn anything from each other. My tribe doesn't really push me to grow, because we're all the same. We're all highly intuitive. You know what I mean? Like, we're all kind of like, we're in this quadrant where we're watery, we're using our intuition, we're trying to heal the planet, we're the counselors and the mystics and the masterminds, right? We're trying to create something new in the world that feeds and fuels the greater good. But that doesn't mean that other people who don't have those goals are not good people. They're just here activating a different destiny line or energy stream. And so being able to create space for that and hold space for that, I think is a better part of spiritual work too. Okay, the mastermind profiles are sometimes called the architects. They're known as the physicists. Their desire not to participate in bullshit makes them look superficial and can make them look rude. Like an INTJ, if a conversation is kind of dumb, you know what I mean? Like it's not going anywhere and it's superficial, or they're talking badly about other people. My husband's least favorite thing as an INTJ is when anybody talks shit about another person. He won't participate. Even if it's me, like wanting to say something, like wanting to vent about somebody, he'll be like, I don't do that very often, but sometimes I'm just like, can I just tell you what happened? Like, it was really upsetting. And he'll just be like, because that's a waste of time, right? They're not interested. They're interested in figuring out how to raise the vibration of the planet to support the highest good in the fastest, most effective way possible. Sending love. So sitting around talking about people or spreading rumors about people, an INTJ is going to look at you and be like, are you even kidding me right now? Which tells you a lot. If you have a lot of people in your life who are like kind of shit-talking, kind of rumor mill people, maybe you need to hang out in the Western Quadrant a little bit more, because the Western Quadrant people are like, I ain't got time for that. You take your low vibe, and I'll tell you where to go with that. And that is the Western Quadrant. And then last but not least, sorry, keep my computer work. We are in the North, which governs thinking and the mind, ancestral wisdom, intellectual development. The Jungian archetypes are the sage, the ruler, and then the Myers-Briggs archetypes are the commander, supervisor, thinker, craftsman. Signs are Virgo, Capricorn, Taurus, and then ENTJ, ESTJ, INTP, ISTP, and Earth. By the way, in the West, if you have Pluto in a water sign, right, as a water sign, what that means for you is that you are going to activate transformation energies through occult wisdom, secret information. That's how you're going to access and transform those energies. And so if your Pluto is governed by water, that is how you're going to activate that wisdom in your life. Okay. Okay. Now, ENTJ is the commander, the born leader, the military leader who has self-confidence, poise, extremely high expectations. Remember, we're in the north now. We are now anchored firmly in the earth element. This is all about, you can even imagine like the major arcana of the tarot, right? And I'm going to activate using the mist for the mind, which governs the north. So beautiful. So beautiful. I am missing my okay. In your earth mist is cypress, patchouli, and oak moss. And it's the oak moss that you're smelling more than any of the other ingredients in that particular blend. And then your gemstones in your set are black tourmaline, which is this, petrified wood, which looks like this, and then you have hematite, natural hematite, which looks like that. And you can see the red. Do you see it right there? Natural hematite has a little bit of natural red, which is sort of telltale, gives it away. Okay, and you can feel it too. The weight and the heft of that is pretty substantial. Okay. Okay, ENTJ, first profile. And like I said, Pluto, depending on what your sun sign is, where Pluto is in your chart and what your elemental profile is, Pluto in the earth signs transforms through power, business, career, and personal wealth. Okay, so it depends on what your elemental profile is. But Pluto, when it's grounding itself into the earth signs, transforms through power, business, career, and personal prosperity. Okay, ENTJ is the commander, the born leader, the military leader, self-confidence, poise, high expectations. This profile of the ENTJ is called the CEO. Okay, this is the higher order leader. In the world, the ENTJs tend to be in high levels of public service, oftentimes as military leaders. They're critical of people's performances, but sometimes are not generous enough with what people do well. They're not on a fault-finding mission, but they tend to notice the mistakes that people make. They sometimes lack social graces. And keep in mind, they are a hair's breadth away from the counselor profile, from the INFJ, from my profile. The difference is they don't make decisions on the basis of their feelings. They don't let empathy drive them, okay? They let their mind operate. And again, in the north, they're governed by thinking. So that thinking mechanism is what they really believe is the best gauge of someone's performance or someone's behavior. So they don't want to be convinced on the basis of feelings at all. In fact, that would seem to be a very unreliable source of information to an ENTJ. An ESTJ, okay, is the supervisor. This is the boss profile, okay? Dignified, traditional. People come to them for advice. What would you do? What would you say? They really appreciate order and practicality. That oak moss, by the way, if you love that mist, that's how you'll know that you're an oak. Whoops. That's how you'll know you're an oak moss lover, is if you love that mist, because that is like resinoid oak moss, true, absolute. It's so beautiful. Okay, ESTJs are rule followers. They're not rule breakers. And what matters to them are their roots, their heritage, their family, the traditions. They like to have their holidays in the same place every year with the same family members there. They have an incredible work ethic. They really understand chain of command and positional authority. So these are people who, you want the ESTJs and you want the ENTJs running your company. They make fantastic bosses and CEOs, right? They're going to balance the books. Everybody's going to have what they need. They attend to the details. So these are really important profiles. Interestingly, in my company, nobody in senior management has these profiles. We are all in the West. So I didn't choose this. I didn't choose the CEO boss, kind of traditional, dignified, conservative. I didn't choose that as people to run Sage Goddess, but that's because it wouldn't have worked with my corporate culture, which is very feminine, fluid, alternative ways of knowing. Do you know what I mean? But in a more traditional company, these tend to be the people who are in charge. It's more of a patriarchal way of knowing than a matriarchal way of knowing. More of a masculine way of knowing. INTP, these are the thinkers. The profile name is engineer. Logical, detail-oriented, analytical. They think for the fun of it. INTPs think for the fun of it. You know what they do for fun, INTPs? They do math. And my husband is like one letter off, right? So I understand because he likes doing puzzles. He really enjoyed taking the LSAT before law school, my husband, because he really liked the logic puzzles and the logic games and things. And so that's that profile. INTP is what you have to know. They're the engineers. Do you know what their biggest fear is? They're terrified of failure. That somebody's going to see them as not good at what they do. Can you imagine if that was your biggest fear? It's not my biggest fear, so I don't sit with that. But I can have compassion for that. If you really thought that failure was the worst thing that was going to happen to you, I have failed in my life, so which is why I don't fear it anymore. But what if you hadn't failed before? And a lot of times INTPs haven't because they're so logical, they're so detail oriented, they're so paying attention to all the details that things don't go wrong because they've already thought through every possible contingency plan and whether they've locked down all the details. So math, systems, logic, all that's very important to INTPs. And then the last profile we're going to talk about, the last of the Myers-Briggs profiles, is ISTP, which is the ISTP, the craftsman, builder, and performer. This is the scientist and the technician. Okay, so in the North, you have all the technical profiles. I know very few people whose profiles are Northern. Again, it's probably just who I am, and because you tend to attract your peeps, you know what I mean? And my peeps tend to be more watery and more Western and Southern. But the North is very valuable. But my husband and my son, who feel very Northern to me by virtue of, astrological sign or other influences in their chart, are both Western by every other measure. So tells you something. They're more technical than artistic. They appreciate technical training. This is ISTP. They want technical training. Show me how to do the thing. They appreciate having computer programs to do things. They're interested in automation. ISTPs want to automate processes. They don't so much appreciate a liberal arts education because ISTPs don't want to learn just for the sake of learning. They actually like to learn, but they like to be in a certificated program, something with an output where they can see the real-time return on the investment of their either financial or time investment in their education. They're very interested in practical aspects of learning. So the number one question, when I used to be a college professor, when I had an ISTP, because I always did Myers-Briggs with all my students, and when I was a corporate consultant, I always did it with all my clients. So I had ISTPs come to me and say, you know what I mean? Am I getting a certificate? Is there going to be a test? If I get a good grade on the test, what do I get? And me as a teacher, I was always you get satisfaction of knowing that you learned today. That's what you get. And they're like, but I don't get a little certificate or a gold star or a little plaque with my name on it. Or ISTPs are the ones, they're always the ones who want to know, what do I get? And how do I prove it to other people that I finished my technical training? Whereas the INFJs are we don't care. As long as we are helping the planet or we helped a person. We don't really care whether we're the kind who will walk away and leave the certificate behind and forget about it. The ISTPs will be the ones who ask you how you're going to mail their certificate, why hasn't it arrived already, and their name might be misspelled. Just to show you, like, it takes all of us to make the world go round, right? And as an INFJ, I have to have huge compassion for that, because if I was a jerk and said, well, you don't need a certificate, or who cares that your name is spelled wrong, you help the planet, right? An ISTP would hear that as that would undermine their trust in me and my credibility with them, because the details really matter. And so that might help you also understand why sometimes you see me as one of my students, or someone in the community who sees me as a single person. And you wonder, like, why does she do that? Like, why does she say those things, or why does she address those things that way? Because I have every Myers-Briggs type in my community. Do I have them in greater proportion? Certain quadrants, of course I do. But they're all there. And so if I poo-poo the idea of a certificate, or if I don't give people credit, or if I don't attend to the details, or if I, you know what I mean? Like, I will lose entire sectors of quadrants of people who value and prioritize things that I don't. And so that's why this becomes a really rich teaching tool, and it reminds you all the time to be mindful that you might sit in the Western quadrant, but there's 3/4 of the planet who sits away from you. And if you can't speak to them, if you can't resonate with them, if you can't adapt and adopt some kind of resonant attitude or syntax or something in your communication, then you're going to lose those people completely. And most teachers would tell you, I'm a teacher. I don't think I'm a teacher of some. I think I'm a teacher of all. And so if I'm going to be a teacher of all, I have to be able to show up and articulate things in a way that resonates with all profile types, which is not easy. Okay, so let me quickly run through, seriously quickly, because we've gone quite a bit over time, and I want to be mindful of that. I know you only have so much time a month to dedicate to your studies, and like I said, if you want more, I got more. So we can go quickly through. I'm just going to tell you about planets and location in your chart, and give you all the information, and then we can come back and do a double click or a deeper dive. Pluto, like I said, represents your shadow. It is the only planet in your chart that tells you something about your shadow, other than the moon, which tells you about your subconscious needs and desires. Pluto, depending on what house it's in, means different things. And the moon, depending on what house it's in, means different things. I'm going to teach you about the houses right now. I just taught you about Pluto through the signs, right? And the moon through the signs, same thing, right? So if your moon is in Sagittarius, like mine is, the occult, right? If your moon is in Aries, subconsciously you feel the need to become, to actualize, because Aries is all about the self and the personal will. If your moon is in Cancer, your subconscious need is to create home for other people. If your moon is in Leo, your subconscious need is to create entertainment for people, or to create ways of bringing people together in life, right? Because Leo is all about entertainment and creating, finding a channel or vessel for fire energy. If your moon's in Gemini, underneath it all, you need to have a strong, compatible intellectual relationship with others. You have to have a way of communicating what you think and feel. If your moon is in Taurus, you have to create art. It's just something that's part of who you are. If your moon is in Libra, underneath it all, what matters to you most are relationships. If your moon's in Scorpio, underneath it all, what matters to you most is mystery and passion and sex and death. If you're a Capricorn, underneath it all, moon Capricorn, underneath it all, what matters to you is your job. Are you doing well in your career or not? Nothing else matters. If your moon's in Aquarius, what matters to you is doing shit differently than everybody else. Doesn't matter what you do, but you're going to do it differently. If your moon's in Pisces, what matters to you more than anything is your imagination. And do people respect your imagination? When you make up things and you do play things or make believe, if people make fun of you as a moon in Pisces, that's devastating, right? And so I think I've hit them all. Moon in Virgo, underneath it all, what matters to you is work and service. You're here to serve others, and so you're not going to be happy unless you're doing that, right? So we talked about Libra, Sagittarius, Capricorn. We talked about Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, Taurus, Gemini. So we've done the whole zodiac. So the same thing with Pluto through the signs. We already talked about Pluto through the signs, but I want you to know the houses. There are 12 houses in your natal astrological chart. And again, like I said, don't feel stressed. We can come back to all of this. We've got 4 more sessions together. Okay, and I'm trying to do sun, moon, and stars. I want you to look at your natal chart, and I want you to look for two things, okay? Three things in an ideal world. I'd like you to know what sign your moon is in and what house it's in. I would like you to know what sign Pluto is in and what house it's in. And then I would like you to know what sign your northern node is in and what sign your southern node is in, okay? The nodes are nodes of the moon. And your north node is what you're here to do in this lifetime. It's your dharma. It's your soul's work in this lifetime. Your south node is what you were here to do last time. So if you're doing in this lifetime stuff associated with your south node, you are not on your soul's path. You're on the path of last life. If you are doing the work of your north node, that's how you know you're on track. My north node's in Capricorn. I'm here to achieve and be successful. When I am here doing that work, when I'm becoming successful and I'm achieving and I'm writing books and I'm teaching and I'm growing Sage Goddess and all that, that is what I'm here to do. 1000%. I know it. My south node is in Cancer. I was here last time to be a mom and to create home for other people. That's an escape mechanism for me. When I find myself mothering people and not teaching them, when I find myself focusing too much on home and not enough on work, I'm not on path. Okay? So your north node and south node, whatever they are, is your dharma. It is your chance to figure out, why am I here this time? Why was I here last time? And am I on track or not? Because your south node becomes a trap. It's what's easy for you to do. Your north node is what's hard, and it's because you're here to do that this time. I don't love being in Capricorn mode, but I know it's why I'm here, and I know how to do it. And I have the people around me and the skills and the tools to do it. Do you know what I mean? So, and you do too. So whatever your north node is, you're here for that. The 12 houses, okay? I'm going to go through this super quickly. Like I said, if you love it and you're like, Athena, I just want more, I will go back. If you're like, this is enough and I don't ever want to talk about this again, I'm good with that too. If your moon is in the first house of your chart, the mantra is, I am. Look at your natal chart. They're all numbered. Go to astro.com, get your natal chart. House number 1, the mantra is, I am. And if your moon is there, it means you wear your feelings on your sleeve. The I am is, I feel this, I feel that, I feel love. Everybody knows how you feel if your moon is in the first house. And the second house mantra is, I have. And if your moon is there, subconsciously you need stuff, possessions. You need to have things to feel fulfilled. So the second house is, I have. The third house is, I think. And if your moon is there, it means you need intellectual stimulation subconsciously. You got to have people talking to you or teaching you things. You want to know things. You like to read books. You like to watch YouTube. So that's I think. My moon, by the way, is in my third house. So is my sun. And we are the intellectuals of our family. So just to kind of share that with you. My daughter's moon is in the fourth house, which is the next one. The mantra is I nurture. And it is the need for mothering and close attachment. That's what so underneath it all, what matters most to my daughter is me and her relationship with me, which is very true. If your moon is in the fifth house, the mantra is, I am fun. And you're here, underneath it all, what matters to you is pleasure and enjoyment of your life. If your moon is in the sixth house, you're here, your mantra is, I am hardworking, and underneath it all, you are here to do good work and to organize things for other people. If your moon's in the seventh house, which is my husband's placement, the mantra is, I am a partner, and they are here to be good companions and partners to a husband or wife. And that is definitely my husband. My husband is here to be a husband. He's a great husband. And the mantra is, I am a partner. By the way, these each have shadow fears. Moon in the first house, the shadow fear is, the shadow is moodiness. They get really moody, but their shadow is they can manipulate other people's feelings. Moon in the first house. Moon in the second house is materialism. That's their shadow. They need stuff, but then they get to the point where they want stuff. Moon in the third house, the shadow is over-intellectualizing their feelings and then closing themselves off. Moon in the fourth house, that nurturing, the shadow is not being able to stand on their own 2 feet and mother themselves. They let other people mother them their whole lives till they're older and they don't have a mother figure anymore, and then they're like, oh shit, I don't know how to take care of myself. Moon in the 5th house, the shadow is hedonism. Are you always fun? Are you always having a good time? That's not life, right? And so moon in the 5th house has to learn that. Moon in the 6th house, I am hardworking. The shadow is insecurity. Am I good enough? Did I do enough? Is my work good enough? Moon in the 7th house, which is I am a partner. The shadow is they don't know how to be alone. Are you always going to be partnered? No matter who you're with, one of you will die first. So that is a challenge for the moon in the 7th house. Moon in the 8th house, which is the house of change, reinvention, self-doubt, worry. Moon in the 8th house, people are obsessed with sex, death. It's a very shadowy moon placement. The mantra is, I connect. And the shadow is, moon and 8th house people don't sometimes know good boundaries, and they can take more than they give. Okay? Moon in the 9th house is the dreamer position, creative position, religious position, philosophical position. The mantra is, I explore. And the shadow is not being able to be happy with life as it is, because they're dreamers. So they always want things to be different or bigger or some other way than they are. And so that's their shadow, is not being happy with things as they are. Moon in the 10th house is about achievement, popularity, and success. The mantra is, I achieve. And the shadow is, who are you without your image? Right? Successful people, it's like, well, that's great that you're successful, but who are you without that success? A lot of times people who have moon in the 10th house wouldn't know how to answer that question. Like for me, without my success, okay, well, I'm a mom, and I'm a partner, and I'm a daughter, and I'm a student of the universe. And there's a lot of things outside of what I do at Sage Goddess that I think are a core part of my identity. Moon in the 11th house is visions for the collective, group relationships. The mantra is, I aspire. The shadow is depression, because these are people who are optimistic because of other people, what they can achieve through the collective, how they can help the collective. But if those people get depressed and discouraged about what's possible, there's almost nothing more sad than that, when they lose their belief that it's possible to change through the collective or through group relationships. Moon in the 12th house needs solitude to recharge. These are the loners. The mantra is, I dream, and I dream alone. And the shadow is ending up alone. My grandmother had moon in the 12th house. And she died by herself. She lived by herself for most of her life. We all knew she was passing away. None of us made it there in time, by minutes. And that was so, I think, how she wanted it. She liked living alone. She was happy living with cats, but she didn't really want to live with a partner. She liked having visitors. But my grandmother was here to be on this planet by herself, and that was very clear. And so moon in the 12th house people, don't feel sorry for them when they're alone. It's actually part of their soul path and their soul purpose to be there. Woo! And so we give thanks. I've passed my label. If you're going to burn your candle for a while, you should always take your label off. I should have taken my label off. But you can safely take it off once you're done burning your candle too. And we give thanks to the shadow guides, as that smoke comes through. For all of your wisdom, my smoke is going to the west. What a surprise. Everything about me goes to the west. I hope tonight's class was fun for you. I hope that the information, the wisdom that I have shared here with you enriches your life on every level. The classes will not all be this long, but I knew I was trying to teach you sun, moon, and stars tonight. I mean, we talked about Pluto, we talked about the moon, we talked about Myers-Briggs, we talked about the medicine wheel and the directions and the elements and the quadrants and the gemstones and the essential oils and I'll tell you something, and it's kind of a nice feeling. The teaching that I have done this year, this is the best I can do. I will tell you, you've got the best of me. Like I am trying to pull together everything from 15 years of an academic and a consulting career, right? Helping executives and students and professors from major universities in every country around the world, all the Fortune 50 companies that I used to consult for. I'm leveraging all of that to try to bring it into a fun, lively context with fun metaphysical tools So I'm glad you're enjoying this experience, because I really do feel like this teaching this year in this shadow class is a culmination of everything I've done to this point. And it's a joy to be able to thread that needle and pull it through this fabric to bring you something that I think is unique and vibrant and different. I derive a lot of pleasure and satisfaction from that, because I really do see myself as a way maker, sort of a bridge builder between different modalities, different ways of thinking, and different ways of seeing. So hopefully there's something in this tonight that was transformational for you. Much more to come. I will wait for your feedback. Hopefully you loved it. And just let me know where you want more, where we can double click and maybe take a deeper dive into Pluto or the moon signs, or maybe you're ready just to move on to shadow collage creating. We're going to get a little crafty next session and get out of our heads and work with our hands a little bit more too. So the smoke continues to come, which is a good sign. Just means we've done a lot of really beautiful work, and giving thanks to all the shadow guides who attended us, releasing them from service to the circle this evening. Cheers. Aho, and on we go. I will look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks for our live debrief. That's kind of our cadence here in Of Light and Shadow. So you have your beautiful recorded class. In 2 weeks, I'm also in your Facebook group. In 2 weeks, I'll come in and I'll pick up with a live conversation, gather your questions in advance just to kind of see what's on your mind. And then 2 weeks later will be our next recorded session. I'll see you soon, everybody. I hope the blessings of your quadrant illuminate much for you in your life and bring you healing, peace, joy, alignment, everything that you see. I'll see you soon.